Ladies and gentlemen of the press, good morning. May I introduce those who will participate in this press conference. Mrs. Elaine Foster Allen is the chair of the PNP's Education Commission, and Michael Stewart, Member of Parliament for South Manchester, is spokesperson on education along with myself. The People's National Party is a party of education in Jamaica, and therefore all significant developments and challenges in the education sector attract our attention, and thus our gathering this morning. This is particularly so because of some events and continuing challenges. The first event is, of course, the imminent release of the primary exit profile results for those who have taken the examination in grade 6. The PNP supports the release of the detailed candidates profile for all those who sat the PEP exam. These details should be used by teachers, parents, and students to assist with appropriate placement and remediation. In other words, rather than just a raw score, how the candidate did, what were their strengths and weaknesses, is going to be available to the school that is receiving, and also to the parents and the students themselves. We insist, however, that the grades and the percentages of each student of each school be made available, as used to be the case, has been the case. That is the only way that we can enable comparison with other students and schools, and the publication of the percentage scores will also disclose to the country how effective has been the introduction of the new standards curriculum and the PEP mode of evaluation. It's important that we conduct that evaluation based on these results. Furthermore, there have been suspicions raised that the reason why the percentage grades are not being given is because the results are so poor. We do not know that, but what we say is give all of the available information to avoid suspicion. The education system cannot work well if there is a cloud of suspicion, of lack of transparency around it. So we are calling upon the government to ensure that all available information, including the percentage grades, should be available to each candidate and to each school. The People's National Party is calling for increased funding and specialist attention for those high schools which will receive candidates who have had weaker results. Please remember that what is going to happen is that the candidates are going to be placed in 4 bands. Beginners, those who have challenges, those who have done reasonably well, and those who have done exemplary. Now, that is good, but not good enough. Many schools will continue to get candidates who have not done well in the PEP exam. We specifically insist on special remedial programs over this summer and beyond to reduce the number of grade 7 students who are ill-prepared socially and academically for high school learning. And I'm going to invite Mrs. Foster Allen to address some particular aspect of how students are streamed and how what requirements they have in order to prevent the failure of so many students within high school.
Thank you. So, good morning, colleagues. The results of the examinations will allow children, as Ronnie has just said, to be placed in 4 bands: beginning, developing, proficient, and highly proficient. Further, children who are deemed highly proficient and proficient will be placed in what is being called Pathway 1. Children who are developing, Pathway 2, beginning, Pathway 3. It is therefore possible that a school could get children who are mainly in pathways 2 and 3. And if they do not get the required resources teacher resources in particular to engage with those children to ensure that they are taught in the areas of weakness and that remediation is in place, then you could end up with those same children moving through the system in that same pathway. What we would want to see is that the remediation and all the resources that are needed are put in place in for the students going into grade 7, so that they do not remain in those streams for the life of their secondary education, but that as soon as they have improved, the school has the capacity to move those children into another pathway. So we would want to encourage, insist, request that the government puts in place the resources that are needed in each of the schools where especially children in pathways 2 and 3 will be placed. And we would want to encourage principals and teachers in those schools to make sure that those children are not, in inverted commas, stuck in pathway 3 for life, but that they are helped, that they are educated, that they are remediated so that they can move between pathways. Thank you.
Sorry. The Ministry of Education has decided to use the scale score this year for the interpretation of the scores. We believe that it is welcome, it's a welcome move, but we should also have the percentage scores. Many of the schools, if not all of them, practice their students using percentage scores in preparation for the examination. It was just on Sunday night that a bulletin was sent out to the schools explaining what the scaled scores mean and how they will be used. This has caused tremendous uncertainty among the schools. Even last night, I engaged a number of parents in my constituency, and they were at a loss as to how these scores are going to be interpreted, how will they understand it. And so we call on the Ministry of Education for both scale scores and for the percentage scores to be used. As we have said before, the People's National Party is not reneging from that position, as we believe that that will enhance the scores of the understanding of the parents, the teachers, and the students, and will put the examination in a more credible situation as we move forward.
The PNP calls on the government, and indeed the entire nation, to resolve that as of this September, there must be no more unexplained dropouts from high school, and that the unacceptably high absentee rate of about 20% is to be brought down. The public must understand that it is almost impossible for a child to do well if the present average of missing up to 1/5 of the school time is continued. Most of the time, dropouts and chronic absenteeism, especially among boys, is where the crime and the gang culture begins. Dr. Herbert Gale and many others who are experts in this field have warned us that it is vitally important to keep boys in school. The present situation, which we have become complacent with, where some 20% of our children are absent every day, is dangerous. It inures against good outcomes, and it is a threat to national security, and it is something we can do about it. We propose the following. The entire island be declared a truancy zone in accordance with the existing legislation. We have the capacity under law presently that makes it mandatory for a child to go to school. Now, many don't go because of poverty and family disorganization, and we continue. We are proposing that at least 100 social workers be engaged and strategically assigned to schools to ensure that attendance rates are significantly improved. We propose that these social workers and principals of schools must be provided or have access to funds to ensure that emergency needs for transportation, personal care, and school supplies can be provided to the close to half of the student cohort who are in need. The nation needs to understand that almost a half of all children going to school in Jamaica are on path. And there are more who need to be on path, but because of the thickness of that system, can't get there. It is folly to expect that you are going to get the best performance in circumstances where people cannot find bus fare, cannot find lunch money, ladies can't find the necessities on a monthly basis, where there are uniforms, school supplies are simply not available from family resources. The government must face the fact that poverty is increasing, not decreasing, and in the education system, it needs to be remediated. We go further. We say that the government must ensure that breakfast and lunch are available to all needy students. Hungry students cannot learn. Presently, $120 a day is provided to most early childhood up to grade 3 institutions for school feeding, and $150 from grade 4 to grade 13. Ladies and gentlemen, that money cannot properly feed a growing child, especially if they have had nothing from home and do not have the funds to supplement. And it is urgent that we recognize that adequate nutrition is an absolute essential, it's not an optional extra to proper performance in the education system. We are calling for an island-wide breakfast program, which is going to be taking all schools, and recognize that even where you have a lunch program, if the child comes to school, probably has had to leave home from 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to get to school, that by the time learning starts, they're going to be compromised if they do not have the opportunity of a good breakfast. We have one other issue to do with absenteeism and with dropouts, and that is to do with the shift system. The former PNP administration had a plan that we would have ended the shift system last year. We now understand that this is going to take some 3 to 4 years further in order to be able to be done. There are still 38 schools in Jamaica on shift, and we are calling for urgent attention to ending the shift system. Instead of spending money on lavish parties and a whole heap of corruption, we need to spend that money, the people's money, to ensure that their children are getting a full day's education with proper appurtenances in order to have the best outcomes. If there's any comment? Yes? Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. It has always been said that the school is a microcosm of the wider society. And what we have seen in recent time is a total breakdown of social values in our schools across the country. The People's National Party has called before on the Ministry of Education to launch a Values and Attitudes program, a very comprehensive and detailed one, to stem the flow of indiscipline which is impacting on the education system of our schools. And we want to reiterate this morning that we would love to see the Ministry of Education having a detailed and a very comprehensive program in the respective schools when it comes to values and attitudes, so our students can be rescued. Too many of our teachers are frustrated when they get into the classroom each day, and proper learning cannot take place. They waste too much time correcting the maladaptive behavior, and that is paramount as relates to the People's National Party's performance. We have been calling for that, and we ask that the ministry revisit that program before the start of the new school year.
By the way, on the values and attitudes issue that MP Stewart raises, I was asked at the beginning of this political administration to sit with the Minister of Education at the time to advance the values and attitudes issue. I'm sorry to say that that effort has flopped. Yes, MP Stewart is very correct. We need to look at the social competencies of our children, which we no longer can presume they're going to get at home or church, and therefore this is not, again, something that can be put off or we can be complacent about. It needs to be done. On the issue of school feeding, I just forgot one sentence in my remarks. Why has Nutrition Products Limited been effectively closed down? It was making a profit. It was extending its reach to more schools when we were in office. Now, it is virtually inactive. We understand it is to be divested and replaced by what? And we ask again, what is the specific targeted program which we left in place regarding incorporating local foodstuffs in the school children's diet, rather than continuing, as if we cannot do better, in the over 90% of that which is provided for students, which is imported food, and bloating the trade deficit and the import bill, genetically modified food we don't even know, when we have good local food, which could, in fact, with proper organization, energize the farming sector, increase aggregate demand, and really, really engender what is called prosperity. We'd like to go on. The People's National Party is very concerned about what is taking place at the Caribbean Maritime University and the agencies of government which are also connected with the Royal Reed scandal. Rumors abound. Investigations seem to have no end. We are told that documents that ought to be provided are not provided. We do not understand why, if the president of CMU is correct, that all of the documents being requested by the investigating agencies are being handed over, then why should there be any legal challenge coming from that department as to how the documents have been secured? If you are indeed giving up everything that is being asked for, why are you objecting to anything? And it is unseemly and bad for education when there is a cloud over not only CMU, but the National Education Trust, to some extent the Heart Trust. Education can't take that. Education has to be a clear, pure, bipartisan, nationalist endeavor. And therefore, this dribble of scandalous and often contradictory information which is coming out about the way CMU and other agencies connected with the Ministry of Education have allowed themselves to be corrupted. We find that wrong, and it needs to be brought to an end now. And we call upon the Prime Minister, who is the effective Minister of Education, to make definitive statements in Parliament to answer the questions which I and other members have asked him about these issues, and to settle the issue now. It simply is not going to go away, and waiting on time to pass in order for that to happen is a deceit. The PNP endorses a call made by Party Leader Phillips for a thorough, quick, independent audit of the Caribbean Maritime Institution. We extend that to the National Education Trust and any other agency against which credible allegations have been made. And we also insist, with distress and pain, that the President of the CMU and the Chief Executive of the NET vacate their offices, go on leave, in order to facilitate transparency and non-interference in all investigations. There's one other matter. The People's National Party supports Minister Samuda's recent call for the non-interference of party politics in the operation of schools. We support that. And so we insist that this very principle which the minister has set out correctly should apply in relation to the appointment of a principal at the Cumberland High School, where we have recently seen a letter from a political activist calling for the board to be removed, when the board has done nothing wrong but to carry out its legitimate functions. This is very concerning. It has a radiative effect, or it can have, in other school situations, and therefore we support that school boards be allowed to carry out their functioning and not to be interfered with by political pressure.
My recollection is that during the discussions and deliberations in 2004 by the task force that was set up by former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, one of the issues that came about was the role of the diaspora in supporting education. What we'd heard was that people in the diaspora, our people in the diaspora, wanted to feel a sense of confidence in the education system when they sent their funds or their goods to Jamaica to support education. And that was one of the reasons why the National Education Trust was put in place. Now, when we have a cloud of suspicion surrounding the National Education Trust and its operations, then of course we must, talk about our concerns. And as Ronnie has just said, that there are issues that are still unclear to us as to what has happened at the National Education Trust and why it has been brought into this place of disrepute.
We specifically want to know what money Dr. or Mrs. Dunswell got, and for what, and why was the engagement made, and who knew about it, and what is going to happen now to that arrangement, and where has the money been disposed of. We hope no helper got it, We need to be very clear. This is the trust of the diaspora which we are talking about. It needs to be vindicated, especially when we're having the diaspora in Kingston now, the conference.
We're also concerned about the tremendous amount of money that was paid to Mrs. Dunswell in terms of what the trust got. It cannot be justified at all that you would have paid so much money up front and what we receive is less than what was paid. It cannot be justified, and we ask for a full investigation into the matter.
We're open to questions.
I see where you call for make sure that partisan politics stay out of educational issues as it relates to the Cumberland High School. But as I understand it, the Prime Minister has intervened in the matter in his capacity as the acting education minister. Do you consider that an interference in and of itself?
I'm asking a question. Why would the Prime Minister want to intervene when the board of Cumberland High has done nothing but what they are supposed to do? He must answer that question.
Do you understand that there were some concerns raised by the candidate who was supposed to be put in the position regarding his own selection?
There may have been, but the regulations, as I understand them, allow the board to take that into full account and to make a determination. And when they have done, except some criminal discrimination can be alleged against them, their recommendation ought to be accepted. This has grave implications for the church schools, where there is a certain level of autonomy. This activity and this precedent, which could well be set in relation to Cumberland, how is this going to affect that autonomy, that concordat between the churches who have responsibility, sponsorship, ownership of almost half of the schools in Jamaica in terms of their jurisdiction over their schools? It is very grave. There should be no politics intervening in this matter.
Just a connected question regarding that. The position of Education Minister has essentially been vacant now for 3-4 months. I'm not sure the exact time.
From March.
I'm concerned that this portal is essentially now at OPM and that doesn't have a fully responsible minister.
I will only repeat what Dr. Peter Phillips has said previously, that education is far too important for it to be cluttered with other responsibilities. It needs a full-time minister to deal with the transformational rather than the incremental aspects of the entire system, which is the absolute foundation and pivot of any hope of 2030, 5 and 4, or any of the other illusions that we seem to encumber ourselves about, unless we fix the education system. Yes, we call for a full-time education minister. We admire the effort that Minister Samuda is making, but he does not have the full authority, nor the experience, he acknowledges that himself, in order to handle this portfolio. Why is it being done this way? It is a shame.
I just want to reiterate the point made by Mr. Thwaites. He having been a Minister of Education, the Minister of Education is one of the most complex ministries in government, with more than 50,000 employees. We have over 30,000 teachers in both the public schools and the private schools. And it must be for the reason that we need to have a full-time Minister of Education dedicated to the operation of the ministry. And it cannot be overemphasized at all. We have 3 Ministers of Education, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, we have Minister Terry Long, and now we have the Minister giving oversight, Minister Samuda. but we would want to see a dedicated minister for the Ministry of Education, such a complex organization within our country, which plays a fundamental role in values and attitude, in social change, in educational transformation, in training, which is critical if our country is to move forward.
Just last week, the Jamaica Teachers Association president-elect had called for the government to move swiftly to stem the flow of teacher migration to first world countries. Do you think enough is being done, and how do you respond to critics who say the PNP administration did not do enough to incentivize the teaching profession?
We share the concern of the Jamaica Teachers Association regarding the loss, particularly of specialist teachers, and we would go further, particularly in science and mathematics. Yes? We believe that there has to be considerable strengthening of the incentives for our best teachers to stay. And we wish to remind the press conference this morning of what we did and to suggest ways to go forward. First of all, when we apprehended in 2014 the beginning of a new wave of migration of specialist teachers, we instituted a program that would fund the training of 100 specialist mathematics teachers at the University of the West Indies and elsewhere. Regretfully, our information now is that that program has been considerably diminished, that there are only a fraction of that 100 who are in fact being offered these opportunities, despite a promise which was made by the previous minister that it was going to be increased. There are some facts that the public need to know. First of all, there is an estimate that over 120 of our specialist teachers have been recruited abroad or have left the service since January of this year. This is in a situation where our statistics, which really I don't think have shown any improvement in the elapse of time, have in fact shown that less than 20% of our high school math teachers are fully qualified both in content and methodology. During our period, we had discussions with the Jamaica Teachers Association in order to arrive at incentives for specialist teachers. We found this very difficult because many of them, there are strict categories of teachers, and one of the mistakes I think the nation is making is that we bargain with the teaching profession as part of the public service, when in fact this creates strictures which make it difficult to achieve the objective which we need to. There is another aspect. The system of bonding of those who have benefited from government state-sponsored education is loose. And the mechanisms in order to do this, to ensure that bonding is observed, needs considerable revamping. I would finish answering your question saying this, that while we recognized it and took some steps in this regard, the process was far from complete, and it is our regret that it has gone no further. In fact, apparently, it has got worse. Allow us to thank you very much for your attention, and we're available individually for any clarification required. Thank you.